Welcome to Warrior Money, the show devoted to supporting our brother and sister veterans. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze.
Fiscal discipline and access to capital is critical to succeed personally and professionally. When only 21% of Americans have only $2,000 in their savings, you got to lean on your friends and family to pay unexpected bills or emergencies. Did you know that according to the Federal Reserve, borrowing from your friends and family is over $200 billion a year? Today, we sit down with a fintech founder, Navy veteran, and co-founder and CEO of Zirtue, who revolutionized automated lending to friends and families with digital promissory notes. Please welcome to Warrior Money, Dennis Cail. Dennis, thanks for joining us, brother.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Dan. Super excited to be here with my fellow service members.
Yeah, and listen, we have all our base codes because we have Army and Navy, so we're good to go.
I love it. I won't hold that against you, but we're here.
And listen, I know you're coming in from Dallas, Texas, so welcome. We always start with bottom line up front. So bottom line up front, you heard me mention friends and family, $200 billion a year industry, critically important. And it's really, the biggest, bank in the world when you look at it. But you started as an enlisted Navy man to become a fintech CEO and founder. How did that happen?
Mostly by God's grace, but, really it's a very crooked path. Started my career in the Navy, as you guys alluded to, but really grew up in low-income public housing in Monroe, Louisiana. We didn't have any banks or credit unions in my neighborhood, but we had several liquor stores and pawn shops that would cash your check for 30% of whatever your check was. So even at a very young age, I knew that was bad math, right? And you kind of fast forward when I joined the Navy as a systems engineer, setting up ship-to-shore, ship-to-ship communications, working with routers, transmitters, receivers, couplers, all the stuff you guys like to talk about at parties, and had a top secret clearance for several years. But, it was one of those situations where when I walked outside the naval base after boot camp, very much a similar scene from the neighborhood that I grew up in. A lot of predatory lenders, buy here, pay here, car lots, rent-to-own furniture stores, payday lenders. And it just hit me in that moment that all these predatory lenders are targeting every demographic that I've been a part of, which is minority, low income, and military veterans. And so for me, in spite of my humble beginnings, it really planted the seed that if and when I had the time, resources, and access to capital to chip away at this issue so that people that either come from these underserved communities like the one I come from, that many of us come from, or maybe they have a life event. Maybe, you're a high income earner, but you get laid off or you have a medical emergency. You don't have to turn to a predatory lender and pay a 400% interest rate. And so that's really kind of what drove me from humble beginnings to the military to ultimately starting Zirtue.
Yeah, and I think that's why Dan and I were so excited to have you on because, you told us how, obviously your grandfather was in the Army, America's varsity team.
Yep.
Your dad, 2 tours in the Navy in Vietnam. But you, the
Marines.
In the Marines, okay. Yep. And then, the first time you were in an airplane was when you went to basic training.
Yeah,
right?
First time.
So that story, and I kind of feel like, all three of us kind of like with a blue collar background, that chip on your shoulder, and then also trying to help people on the outside don't realize, listen, the millions of folks who are in active service right now, or the 18 million American veterans, they understand in the military, if you don't pay your loans off, you can get court-martialed, you get UCMJ. You actually have to pay your bills by the law, or you could arguably get court-martialed. Is that been some of a motivating force when you talk about Zirtue and that friends and family, not just the access to do it, but then that digital promissory note that is the backing behind it and that payment plan?
I think so. You look at the stress that you called out, Patrick, that comes with not just being a service member, but the fact that you have to stay current on your bills. And it's not just a ding on your credit score in the civilian world, but if your company commander or your superiors get a letter from your creditors, it becomes a real issue for your service, right? You get court-martial and everything else. That same level of stress is kind of what I grew up with in Monroe, Louisiana, where I'd be in the middle of watching TV and the lights would go off because the bill wasn't paid. And as a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, that's a very stressful situation. So the stress is sort of transferred itself, for all intents and purposes. And so what we try to solve for at Zirtue is look for ways and opportunity to mitigate that stress for people, to meet people where the pain point is, so that they can get that hand up versus a handout when they need to pay those essential bills.
Yeah, we talk a lot on the show about finding purpose and transitioning purposes, right? And so let's talk about the end of your resume, not kind of where you are now.
Sure.
You're on the board of several nonprofits, you're on the board of several businesses, and you founded a business. Can you talk a little bit about what you're currently doing and what that all looks like?
Sure, absolutely. So I sit on a couple of different boards. The YMCA Foundation board is one, the Goodwill Dallas board as well. I'm on the Dallas Regional Chamber Board in Dallas, which does a lot for the city of Dallas. I'm on the American National Bank of Texas Board of Directors as well. So a few nonprofits and for-profit companies, but very much a long ways, from where I started in Monroe, Louisiana. Dan, to be honest with you, and I'm very humbled by this, but I always try to look for ways and opportunities when I'm in the room to make sure that I'm being a voice for the people who are not in the room, right? And so before I join any board or organization, I always try to look for ways to say, okay, how can I be helpful? Because it's not just about me being on the board and taking up a seat. That's not my idea at all. In fact, I've turned down board positions that I didn't feel like I could add value to, right? But where I see opportunities to add value and where I think the organization is being very intentional about the problems that they're solving, those are organizations that I want to be part of, and I want to figure out how we can amplify that. So
so to get where you are, to be able to have that impact, you had to have started somewhere in the transition outside of the Navy.
Yeah.
When you were in the Navy, can you talk about how you transitioned? Like, how did you actually transition from the Navy to going to school to having the ability to have like that start of the path from post-service time?
Yeah, I think I didn't have a roadmap, right? I didn't have a blueprint or anything like that, but I knew I wanted to just do my 4 years in the Navy and get out, because I figured if I did 8, I would just end up doing 20. And nothing wrong with that. I have a lot of fellow Navy buddies who did the same thing. But for me, I started applying at a bunch of different colleges about a year before I got out, and was hoping to get some sort of scholarship, and ended up getting a computer science scholarship, and ultimately getting my MBA in finance as well.
SMU, right?
SMU in Dallas. And so for me, it was just a lot of work just to really try to figure out what things would work. And but it started with education too, right? Because it's one thing to have the military experience, which gave me a lot of discipline, a lot of focus that I didn't have before. And then once I got the education, that just sort of opened my mind to all the opportunities and possibilities that were out there. And I started trying to use my God-given talents and skills to figure out how I can be helpful, right? And so it was a lot of God's grace, I think, that helped put me in these situations, so that, I can get the education that I needed to get the careers that I wanted to have, and then ultimately try to figure out ways to reach back and be helpful and mentor other folks as well.
You mentioned scholarship for computer science. Did you also use GI Bill or any of the government sponsored
Absolutely
things?
Yeah, I used the GI Bill because college is expensive. It's not getting any cheaper. I mean, you look at the numbers today, think about 4 million Americans are at risk of being in default on their student loans.
And they just started again.
Yeah. And so
mandatory payments.
The mandatory payments are going to kick back up, I believe, May 5th or 6th. So I'm sure there's a lot of stress going on in this country right now, just on that one data point alone. So, but yeah, the GI Bill was super helpful. The military experience just was helpful. It just helped me grow up, to be honest with you. And I'm honored to have been able to serve in the Navy.
And I think the great thing is about in the military, we're always taught about you solve problems, you solve pain points, right? So the pain point of, hey, listen, only 25% of Americans have $2,000 in their bank account, right? So when an emergency does happen, when I can't make the electric bill or whatever, 75% of Americans don't have it. So they go to friends and family, and Walk us through how Zirtue helps, how that works in the front end where you could actually lend the money, but also how the promissory note and a payment plan is there, because you can always Venmo someone, right?
Yeah.
But then when you need that money back, I do it with the homeless veteran. I'm looking at Zillow, the Zirtue to maybe do it with him because, when I lend him money, I'm trying to guide him the right way and not just give it for free.
Yeah, I think that's just it. I think, you can always Zelle, Venmo, or PayPal someone money and hope and pray you get that money back. But with Zirtue, there is a digital promissory note. We keep a digital paper trail of how much is owed, how much has been paid. If I'm borrowing money on Zirtue, I am required to link my bank account and my debit card to my Zirtue profile. And I'm agreeing based on the terms that I'm setting with my friend or family member, and these are 0 interest rate loans, that Zirtue is going to draft my account each month until my friend or family member is fully repaid. Now that right there by itself is already vastly different than what you can get with your standard peer-to-peer payment apps. But at our core, what we do is we work with national, local, and regional billers. And so if you have a borrower who's trying to get from one bill to the next or one paycheck to the next, but doesn't want to pay a 400% interest rate to a payday lender, and then you have a family member or friend that's willing to provide that financial lifeline, but doesn't want to be taken advantage of, wants to have some more transparency into where the money is actually going, how the money is actually being used. And then third, but not least, you have that biller that's looking to capture at-risk payments while creating a better customer experience. Because the last thing billers want to do is disconnect your service or ding your credit score. So Zirtue is really the nexus that sits in between all of these relationships to solve for this problem in a very real-time, meaningful way.
Yeah, well, listen, that's awesome. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come right back with Dennis Cail. Welcome back to Warrior Money. We're here with Dennis Cail. Dennis, I got these stats. I thought they were pretty interesting because we talked before the break about, peer-to-peer, friends to family, lending money, but you also do it business to customers, right? So last year, Goldman Sachs found that 77% of small businesses are concerned about access to capital. On Deck said 70% of small businesses were had less than 4 months of operating costs. So, how important that is. And that basically, majority have to tap in to the personal funds, when they're running a small business, which the majority of companies in America are small businesses. How does Zirtue help small businesses help their customers?
Yeah, we realize just the same thing that you just called out, Patrick, that a lot of companies, especially our small, medium-sized businesses, are struggling to even stay alive, to even stay in business. And a lot of that has to do with their ability or inability to collect on the money that's owed to them, right? So about a year or so ago, we started getting outreach. People started reaching out from different small companies saying, hey, can we leverage Zirtue to collect on some of the money that we're owed, whether it be from people or from other companies. And at first, we didn't do anything with it. And about 10, 12 companies later, we decided we'd start a beta program, which we're in the middle of that now, that gives companies the same opportunities that we give consumers who want to lend money and have a better chance of getting that money back. We are basically allowing those companies to sort of set payment terms with companies and consumers that owe them money versus writing those funds off. And it essentially allows them to allow those vendors and or customers to pay over time, but at least they get to capture that as revenue versus writing it off. And that's a meaningful thing for companies that are just looking to stay alive, because most businesses go out of business because they simply can't collect on the money that's owed to them, or you can't get you can't get adequate business to support your business, right? But I think once you figure out how to solve the problem of staying in business, you've really figured out how to grow your business. So
yeah, there's a kind of funny adage that the best way to make a lot of revenue is to start by a little bit of revenue.
that's right.
And if you make a little bit of revenue, then you can figure out how to make a lot of revenue.
There you go.
But there's always inflection points, like the 0 to first million to $3 to $5 million, and above that, like you've got to learn how to kind of manage your money through that scaling process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's I was fascinated by the stat. I didn't realize that this was true, but there's 5.6 million about unbanked Americans currently in America. It's hard to imagine that there's 5.6 million people that are either putting money into I don't know, a laundry basket or a refrigerator.
Yeah.
How do you view that? Like, 'cause it's almost so primitive to us, like on this show, thinking about like, hey, Yahoo Finance, this is great, but like there's still people that don't have bank accounts.
Yeah, 5.6 million of them.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them use Zirtue as well. And we talk to a lot of them. And we asked them that same question: Why are you not, why do you not have a bank or use a bank? And a lot of them, it's because of the relationship they've always had, their family has had with banks or institutions. There's a lack of trust there that they don't have, but a large percentage of them tell us that, look, I don't make enough money to have a bank account. By the time I get my paycheck, it's gone. So what would be the point in me even having a bank account? And that's something I don't think that gets talked about enough, right? So, and they're paying their bills through different services, whether it's going into one of these pay direct services through a Walmart or something like that. So we actually hear different things when we're actually talking to people, and in terms of the reasons why.
I'm super. I gotta ask. So all right, before the show we were talking about like customer experience and talking to people and how sometimes it's not a great experience.
Yeah.
I'd love to know how you actually talk to people that don't have banks. Like how do you get to them? How do they get to you? What does that conversation look like? How are you engaging with them in like a real way where they're even telling you that they don't trust banks?
Yeah, well, two
trust
things.
institutions, I should say.
Yeah, so again, our whole mission is to drive financial equity and inclusion one relationship at a time, and we do that by simplifying loans between friends and family. So close to a year, 2 years ago, a lot of underbanked people reached out and said, hey, I want to borrow money, I want to pay it back, but I don't have a bank account. That's what and we have this whole model where we call partnership with purpose. So, okay, we're not going to force you to get a bank account. Maybe we can put you in a position where you can get the money you need to pay the bills you need now, and then graduate you into, traditional bank accounts and credit products that work for you. But let's meet you where you are today. That's what drove our partnership with MoneyGram. Right. And so we partner with MoneyGram so that people that are unbanked can borrow money on Zirtue, receive those funds via cash, go to the closest agent, and also repay that money via cash as well. In the process of them doing this, we're learning a lot more about them. We start to offer up different alternatives.
The reality is there's lack of trust in government and institutions and banks.
That's right.
So being a Navy man and coming from the most well-respected profession, you're telling folks, hey, this is simple as this. You just have to tie into it. I got it. Yeah, and especially when you look at the rise of crypto and everything else, people do want to be, especially the younger generation, they want to be unbanked.
That's right.
It's also fascinating because you're capitalizing entire communities. It's not just like the person that doesn't have the bank.
Right.
It's the fact that they can't go into the corner store and buy whatever they need to go buy, or they can't go to the laundromat and go, so you're capitalizing the ecosystem around where you're talking about.
Yeah. And that's that meeting people where the pain point is, and we don't try to enforce our way of doing things. We just try to figure out what partnerships make sense to drive more impact.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know we're going to we're Q&A in a second here, but the fact that like Ernst & Young said you're the entrepreneur of the year in the Southwest, the fact that you're in the Texas Business Hall of Fame, the fact that you're serving on these for-profit, nonprofit boards, and that you're here with us today is pretty awesome. And I hopefully people are listening and realize there's a light at the end of the tunnel and a way forward with Zirtue. But let's go to Q&A.
I hope so.
All right, my first and favorite question is, what's some money advice that you know now that you wish you knew when you were younger?
Man, money advice, invest early and often. I think some people that grow up in like the neighborhoods I grew up in, they have a perception that if you invest, you can lose your money. So there's a huge perception in low-income communities that the stock market is a lot like Vegas.
It's rigged.
So I might as well go to Vegas, right? And it's rigged, right? And so I think, having some sort of financial literacy education early on would have been super helpful for me to just even put a few dollars away into, S&P or some safe place and just watch that grow. I think would have been advice that my older self would give to my younger self. And by the way, there's no such thing as not having enough money to invest. So
yeah. What's the biggest financial mistake that people make on their journeys?
The biggest financial mistake I would say people make is probably not saving money, not paying themselves first. And my mom taught me this, right? Always pay yourself first, and make sure that your lifestyle doesn't exceed, what you need to do to take care of your bills. And so I've always made it a practice not to live beyond my means. I'm just obsessed with that. So, because I always like to have money in my pocket and know that I'm tucking money away somewhere. So I think, not doing that or being intentional about that is a mistake.
And I think you've got kids.
Yes.
So as you're on your journey now, what are you hoping to expose to them now that you didn't have exposure to when you were a kid?
Entrepreneurship. I think that's my big thing for them. I want them to have an owner's mindset. Nothing against corporate America, and they'll grow up and they'll have internships and they'll work for people and do everything else. But what I really want them to do is have a sense of ownership and not be afraid to take risk, and be okay with failing. But one of the things I try to really teach them is that if you can find a way to not let your failures discourage you, you will always find a way to be successful. So I'm really trying to make sure they get that point. And then with that, whatever they do, they're going to be wildly successful.
That's awesome. Yeah, the play to win. If you're afraid you're going to get hurt, you're going to get hurt.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, if I'm playing football and I'm afraid to get hit,
you're going to get hit.
I will never get on the field. Anyway. But the reality is I'm going to get hit, right? So I try to make sure that we instill that value system in them, and to know that it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah. Listen, Dennis Cail, thank you so much. Navy veteran, co-founder and CEO of Zirtue. Thanks for joining us on Warrior Money. We appreciate you and your continued service to this great nation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so that's our show. So listen, subscribe, and review Warrior Money on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts, or find us at Yahoo Finance. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze. We'll see you again next week.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.